Good evening, Davangere. Chennagidira. Not getting any response. Good. Thank you. Before I start, I must admit that I'm truly honored and it's an absolute pleasure to stand in front of you and speak on the topic, generation gap, and how changing mindsets can help all of us to bring down this gap. I have a small disclaimer or a caveat to make. I'm not going to talk on a very flamboyant, a very convoluted, a very complicated topic. Rather, I'm going to talk on a very simple, straightforward, uncomplicated, rather a cliched topic, and that is generation gap. But what could set apart my talk, or what could make my talk unique, is that I'm going to offer you a set of solutions that I have experienced as an educator and as a school leader for the past 23 years. Now, I got a question for all the youngsters sitting out here. I know that there are grade 8s, grade 9s, and grade 10s. How many of you heard the phrase, back in my days? Back in my days, when I was a teenager, I used to do this completely differently. Back in my days, when I was your age, I can't even think of doing something like that. Have you heard this phrase from your parents, from your teachers, from your grandparents, from your elders? Please raise your hand if you have heard this. Okay, quite a few hands are being raised right now. That shows the fact that generation blame game does happen. And I must admit, at one point in time, I also used to blame the current generation. I am a deputy principal pastoral at TISB, which is a boarding school. Whenever I go during the weekends, be it a Saturday, be it a Sunday, whenever I see my own students glued to the laptop using the smartphones, and I got 2 teenagers at my home, whenever I see them using phone, laptop, I always tell them, back in my days, when I was your age, be it a weekend, be it a Saturday, be it a Sunday, be it after school hours, I straight away go to the field. I play cricket, I play badminton, I play basketball. Doesn't matter if it was raining, doesn't matter if it was sunny, I was always at the field. I used to cycle, I used to jump into the river, I used to catch fish, and the comparison is endless. But I must also confess that back in my days, when I was a teenager, there was only one TV in the house, and there were 10 people. On a Sunday, my mother reserves the TV well in advance. 8:30, there was a program called Chitraha. She says, well in advance, 9 a.m. on a Sunday, I need TV. I wait patiently for my mother to finish watching TV. Then my grandmother takes it for watching Ramayana and Mahabharata. And evenings was always reserved for my dad to watch news. And then it was a constant battle for the remote between me and my sisters. So I used to think, why all this pain? Rather, I call my friends, and we used to go outside and play. And that was back in my days. Okay, so I have a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer me. When you compare generations, doesn't every generation have its own unique set of challenges? Is it really possible to compare generations? I don't need an answer. Keep this in one corner of your brain, because I am going to come back to this question and ask you at some point in time later at my presentation. Okay, so let me go to the second segment of my talk. I've been repeating the word generation for quite some time. And most of you sitting out here knows the 2 generations that I'm talking about. It's the millennials and the Gen Zs. But again, when I was rehearsing, when I was writing the script for my talk, I was wondering, since there are a lot of grade 8, grade 9, and grade 10 students, all of you might not know the exact difference between who is a millennial and who belongs to Gen Z. So I thought it's not a waste of time if I spend a couple of minutes on educating all of you. Who are millennials? What are the unique traits? Who are Gen Zs? And what are the unique traits? Millennials are anybody who's born between the years 1980s and 2015, right? Some of you sitting out here are a millennial. Am I right? Can you please raise your hand if you are a millennial, if you are born between the age 1980 and 1996? Quite a few millennials. How many of you are Gen Zs? Gen Zs are the one who's born between in the year 1997 and 2016. If anybody is born between 1997 and 2016, can you please raise your hand? You belong to what is called as Gen Zs. Now, what is you? Thank you, quite a few. That's the majority of you. So what's unique about millennials? Millennials are unique. We are not as complicated as the Gen Zs. Can I tell you the reason? Because most of our childhood, we did not have technology. Technology came in when we were in the late teens or when we were in the college. Some of the millennials sitting here out smiling, and these are some of the gadgets that we were exposed to. We saw the advent of internet. We saw the first generation smartphones, Nokia 3310. That was the phone at that point in time. For us, storage was floppy disk. The Gen Z sitting here would not have heard of the term floppy disk. For us, watching movie was a video cassette recorder, VCR. Listening to music was an audio cassette. So for us, life was not that complicated because technology came in much later. So we were more hands-on, we were actually on the ground, and we could solve problems much more easier. Then comes the Gen Zs. I don't know how many of you sitting here knows the fact that Gen Zs are also called as Zoomers. Anybody knows why Gen Zs are called as Zoomers? Because COVID time, all the classes became online, and most of you did classes through Zoom. That is why Gen Zs are otherwise called as Zoomers. Now, what is unique about Gen Zs? Okay, because Gen Zs were born with internet. You guys were born with smartphone. You were born with social media. And often you are blamed for actually not a fault of yours. In fact, it's not even fault of your parents, because you were given a smartphone. Think about it. What was the age when you were given a smartphone? Most of the toddlers during COVID had smartphones. Most of the pre-KG students, middle school students, they were given a laptop because classes were done online. So for no fault of yours, you are being blamed because you always is hooked to the internet. You have been blamed because you never go out and play. So what I'm trying to tell all this while is there is a lot of blame game happening. There's a lot of misunderstandings happening. So which means this blame game needs a solution. This is the solution which I'm going to talk about from my experience as an educator. Now, this is a question to the millennials. How can the millennials change their mindset? First of all, go back to your family and think whether there is dialogue happening. Is there a conversation happening in families these days? Parents come back after work, they are extremely tired, okay? Then they sleep for some time, or they read the news, or they just sleep. Students come back from school, what do? They have their snacks, and straight away they go for after-school sports, after-school tuitions, badminton classes, abacus, Sudoku, and the list is endless. By the time they come back home, it's study time, and there is, again, no conversation is happening. Please keep this in mind. And by the dinner time, all of us are so dead tired that that's a time for us to look at social media, look at a WhatsApp, and this is the typical scenario that's happening in most of the families these days. And who is responsible for this? Whose mindset should change? It's the millennials. It's ours, it's the teachers, it's the parents. They should create opportunities for having this dialogue within the family. Create a rule. When you're having dinner, no phone. Sunday lunch, no phone. This is something that I do with my family. I'm a millennial. I got 2 teenage kids. I have set a golden rule in my family. Whenever we are having food, we eat together, no TV, no smartphone, nothing. Talk. There's so much to talk if you take a considerable day. And whenever we are driving, I randomly take my car, And the whole purpose for me to go for short trips and long trips is to go and make sure that there is dialogue happening inside the car. There is a rule in my family, when we are driving, when we are going for trips, no phones are allowed. Because dialogues are not happening in families these days. This is for the teachers. Often teachers come and tell me, making rapport with the students is very difficult, it's extremely difficult. I ask them one straightforward question. Do you speak the language that the Gen Z is like? Think about it. There are a lot of teachers out here. Do you speak the language that the Gen Z is like? Now, what language is it? Is it Kannada? Is it Hindi? Is it English? This is the language of sports. This is the language of movies. This is the language of fashion. This is the language of technology. These are the things that Gen Z is like. For me, as an educator, for me as a parent, speaking Gen Z language was much easier because I was a basketball player. I played for my school, I played for my college, I played for my district. I watch NBA. For those of you who don't know what is NBA, it's the National Basketball Association. I'm a huge LeBron James fan, hardcore LeBron James fan. So naturally, I support Lakers. So for me, speaking with Gen Zs or my own kids becomes much easier because whenever I go for a class, the 2 minutes before the class, we talk about sports. We talk about cricket. We often criticize the teams. Whenever I go for long drives, my daughter is my go girl because I ask her purposefully, what are the songs that you guys listen to? Then I put on the Spotify and try to listen to the songs which the current generation likes. This helps me to connect with my students and my family. So teachers, don't just teach. Understand what the current generation likes. Make it a point to speak about what they like. Now, how can Gen Zs change their mindset? First and foremost, this is to the youngsters out here. Can you please raise how many of you have smartphones out here, the Gen Zs? How many of you are given a phone? This is astonishing. Only very few hands went up. Okay, if you have been given a phone, if you have been given access to social media, if you have been given access to internet, who has given you this access? It's your parents. So let parents take some decisions in your family. If they have given you a phone, they can restrict how much time you should have phone. What is the time that you should cut off from phone? What are the social media sites that you should have access to? How much time you can invest in social media? This is something that I installed in my kids' phone. Both of my teenage kids has phone. I have installed a parental app called Custodio. I would recommend all parents to install this app in your child's phone. The dialogue, the conversation was very difficult at the beginning because both my kids did not like the fact that I am installing a parental app in their phone. The reason was not to spy on them. The reason was not to have a surveillance on them. I just wanted to know as a parent how much time they are spending on internet. What are the sites they are watching? So for Gen Zs, your parents and your teachers mean all good to you. They have seen more number of years than you actually seen. So listen to them, accept what they are saying, be a bit more resilient towards criticisms, right? So now I think I'm very clear the mindset that the millennials need to change to, the mindset that the Gen Zs need to change to. There is no point in criticizing each generation. It is very cliched for all the millennials to say that the Gen Zs are complicated. I think my time is ending. I just got one question for you. Keep this in the back of your mind before I conclude. No generation is complicated. Gen Zs are not complicated. It is the circumstances which we are partly responsible for, and that is what makes them complicated. Have a dialogue, set some rules, and I'm sure the relationship between a teacher and a student, the relationship between a parent and their children are going to be peaceful, and there are going to be more smiles in the family. Thank you, and that's from me.